Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Perfect RIA podcast. I'm your host, Matthew Jarvis, and on this week's episode of What Works Wednesday, we have rockstar financial advisor and my good friend, Sten Morgan, back on the show. Sten, how are you today?
Good, brother. Thanks for having me back.
Oh, man, I can't wait to have you back on. I'm really excited today to talk about the value that advisors deliver to clients, not in some kind of like hypothetical, like, hey, we're saving the world, but I mean, you were really the master at writing this out in crayon for clients. Here's the value that we're bringing to the table.
Yes, we found that one, there's a lot of head trash around. Our advisors valuable just with their ideas and time. You know, I came up in the business, Raymond James, even the insurance side, where it was like products were really what we had to offer. And all you needed to do was get better at selling the products. That was your whole focus. I've had products changed on me. I've had like so much of that is out of your control. And for me as a young advisor, I was like, if I just keep playing the same game, it's going to take me a long time. Like our industry says, like, hey, if you can survive for 10 years, you'll have a good life. But most of us don't. You know, what is it? 8 out of 10 fail before 5 years. And so for us, I'm saying, what if I was a young advisor and somebody taught me to say, hey, I can come up with a great plan for you. And I'm really confident how I explain the ideas and quantify the ideas, which we'll talk about today. And you will actually pay me for my time and ideas. Imagine how much faster we could have created revenue to hire people, to get office space, as opposed to the slow, long AUM game or the random insurance policies. So we're on a mission, man, to kind of shake it up and say, hey, AUM is great. We love that business model. Insurance is needed. But what if you could add 6 figures to your business in any given year and even more? We'll do close to $700,000 financial planning fees alone this year. Oh, and we're getting more AUM and more insurance than we ever have also.
Yeah, and I think the other side of that is obviously you're making a great living, but of course you're delivering an incredible amount of value to clients. And this was something I really learned from you, Sten, you're articulated in a way that prompts them to take action. An example that you showed at our conference one time, right, was related to whether it's retirement plan contributions or something. And we all get hung up on, well, hey, if you contribute 20 grand this year, it means this. And you quickly said, well, hey, you're probably going to do this for 10 or 20 years. And again, Sten, you'll have to correct me because you do this better than I do. Hey, so if we're doing 20 grand a year for 20 years, now we're talking $400,000. Suddenly the client's saying, oh, 400,000, I'll take action for 400,000. 20 grand or 2 grand or $200, probably not going to do anything about.
Yeah, I found that people solve big problems, not small problems. I mean, that's like when me and you have conversations. Like Matt, if you listen to Matt, you know this, but if this is your first time listening to Matt, like he only talks about big stuff, which is great, makes all of us uncomfortable, challenges us to be better. A client needs a big problem to solve to register it for their limited time. And I fear that most advisors that are all saying probably the same thing, fact finder, it's more of an interrogation. Hey, I'm listening for problems so I can solve them with a product because I need to get paid. I know I'm adding value, but it stops at the product. The person gets in their car and they're worried about the work presentation, picking their kids up from soccer. Most of us are not registering on their, wow, I need to take action soon on that. Versus where we can get people to meet with us, you know, they're asking us, hey, when can we meet again? Because we've just raised their alarms to like, wow, this is something I should really solve.
Yeah, and I think where this manifests itself for the advisors listening is when you have a prospect who doesn't want to schedule, when you have a prospect who's not giving you, advisors will say, Sten, I know you hear this from other advisors, hey, the prospect won't give me a client copy of their tax return, or they haven't given me all the investment information. It's because you haven't, I don't say made it a big enough problem, but you haven't provided enough value. You haven't demonstrated like, hey, with this information, where there's incredible levers we can move. Otherwise, it just feels like a headache. Oh, I got to go dig up more documents to send to this guy. And I think he's just trying to sell me something. I mean, these are night and day differences in here.
Yeah. And I think in our training and our teachings, we tell advisors how, even from first contact, how you create a different impression. Because if what you say is, hey, I'm a financial advisor, you lost him. You know, it's like, well, how do you specifically answer the question, what do you do? When we get asked that. And we spend about 2 hours in our live events or even our trainings teaching advisors how to answer that question. Because I've been in a room with 50 advisors before, and I've said, okay, who has a good answer to this question if a client asks you, what do you do? And they're studs in the room, been in the business for 20 plus years, making millions of bucks, and it's crickets. And they're even embarrassed to share it with each other because they're like, I don't know, I just say that I manage money or wealth. And so it starts there, but as soon as you get a first meeting, how do you create such a different experience that people are saying, when can we meet again? Or I never had a meeting like that before. And so we teach advisors that you need to teach concepts and strategies. Because in a first meeting, you haven't received all their information yet. So it's hard to jump up on the board and start blowing their mind. But what if you taught them something like, for example, what I call the investment decision filter? If I'm 5 minutes into a meeting and I'm having small talk, I'll say something like, hey, have you ever heard of the investment decision filter before? And usually they'll say, no, I made it up.
Sure.
And I say, great, you're going to love this. And I jump up on the board. And what's amazing about a whiteboard in your conference room is like if you stand up, the energy in the room goes up. You're immediately the authority in the room and you're teaching them something as opposed to sitting across with illustrations like most of us have done for years. And I'll say, every decision you make for the rest of your life, when it comes to investments, I want you to remember this. And I'm telling them, I'm giving you this for free. And hopefully you never forget it. And there's a chance they don't. It just embeds into their mind. I said, every investment you need to think about 4 filters: performance, risk, fees, and taxes. And I write it up. I say performance, risk, fees, and taxes. And I say, unfortunately, sometimes people, all they care about is fees. And I say, well, would you pay a high fee for something that gave you great performance? Of course I would. Okay, so we just solved the fee hurdle in a way in their mind. What if the performance was great, but taxes were really high and it cut your performance in half? And so I walk through a few different scenarios. At the end of it, we're just starting our meeting. I just gave them something that most likely no one's ever taught them before. And what's cool about concepts is I didn't need to know anything about them. Similar to the 3-bucket approach. You could teach anybody that. The filter, so you have to have at least 2 or 3 concepts that are just ready in your pocket for you to teach these people, because you have to create rapport.
I love that, Sten, because it's, and I always call this part of the prospect process, right? You're delivering value to them without even really anything in exchange, right? You're not holding your cards back. Now, there's a lot that you know that you're not sharing that first meeting. 1, it doesn't make sense. 2, they haven't paid, right? But you're saying, hey, here's this 4-step thing. By the way, you can take this, like kind of you alluded to, even if we never work together, even if we never see each other again, please always use this. The beauty, and Sten, I know you know this is for our listeners, you've now you've changed the entire filter when they go to talk to any other advisor. So if they go to talk to the advisor across the hallway and that advisor jumps in with performance or fees, the 2 that everybody likes to just beat up on, the prospect's waiting for these other 2 things from the filter, 3 things from the filter to come down. Like Sten has just changed the entire discussion in his favor. Now, by the way, also in the prospect's favor, right? No prospect has done a disservice by having these 4 filters. So I don't want anyone to think, hey, Sten's got this really clever way of articulating it. This is a really smart way of articulating it. It's benefiting the prospect. Sten, it puts you then head and shoulders above everyone else.
Yeah. So we teach a lot on whiteboarding because, again, most advisors they meet with are going to sit across from them, talk about some illustrations. Like, it's not going to be a memorable experience.
No.
And you have to make an impression. Like, it has to feel different. So we're generous with our ideas. We really don't hold anything back. It's like that Getting Naked Patrick Lencioni book, like the premise of being, just give it to them. Because the chances somebody's going to take your ideas and go shop for another person is small. The chance they're going to take it and try to learn it on their own and implement themselves is really small. And so try to have that abundance mentality. Where the magic comes in is the quantifying. So imagine you've practiced on the whiteboard, you get really good at standing up and teaching. And I mean, the advisors, you'll enjoy your meetings more too than the old day. I learned that. Is that if you can take an idea like, hey, paying your kids, say you own a business and your kids are helping with the business, and you say, did you know that you could pay your kids up to the federal exclusion limit and they pay no taxes and you get to write it off? Oh, I've never heard of that before. In the past, I would have left it there. Now I jump up to the whiteboard. I draw, say, hey, let's just for ease of math, let's say $13,000 a year. And I draw that 3 times because they have 3 kids working in the business. And I say, that's, $39,000 a year. And then I say, let's assume your tax rate's 30%. Okay, roughly that's a $12,000 a year savings. But we're going to keep doing that, right? Times it by 10. So this one idea is worth $120,000 to you over the next 10 years. Now imagine if I came to that prospect and said, hey, to work with us this year, it's going to be $10,000. In the first meeting for free, and I'll say this, I did that in less than 10 minutes. Imagine what I can do in 12 months.
Yeah.
Those are kind of the mic drop moments you need to be able to say so confidently, because of course you're going to be like, you've just paid for yourself. Like, there's no longer this trust gap where most advisors say, hey, work with me. I hope you like me, and trust me, it's going to work out. And they have no idea if you're really good or you're not.
Yeah, it definitely is a trust gap. And so many advisors just fall back on, whether they want to admit it or not, on performance, even if they're not trying to outperform, or they fall back on some Monte Carlo illustration. Hey, we took you from a 68% probability of success to 72, which nobody means, and it's not a big problem. It's like, well, I don't even know what this report means. It's all made up variables. So I love this. Like you said, right out of the gate, $120,000 of value in this example. Our fees $10,000. And this was the low-hanging fruit, right? What are those mic drop moments? This is the low-hanging fruit. This was the first couple of minutes. Imagine what we could do once we take a deeper look. There's a lot of stuff behind that.
Yeah, and my hope in our structure we teach is that you can open with a concept because you don't have to have all the data yet. You build some rapport so they open up. And then if you can share about 2 strategies in that first meeting, you have them. You're not showing a proposal yet. You're going to tell them that, hey, there's a fee to work with us. And then in the second meeting is where you get more information, position a couple more strategies, and then you hit them with, hey, look at all this value we found in 2 meetings together. And I use this line a lot. I'll say, whether you work with me or somebody else. Because remember, we're interviewing them too. Like everybody that walks in our office doesn't get to work with us. And what that means to them is, really, even if we don't work together, I'm giving you this. And there's a reciprocity thing in people's mind that it's like, I don't know if we're a good fit together yet, but let me give this to you. And so part of that, obviously, you need to be genuine. We're not trying to manipulate people.
No.
But we had an advisor that we were working with in coaching, and we came up with the idea of idea stacking, meaning, what if in that first example, we're talking about paying your kids, and we say every year we're going to save you about $12,000 in taxes. Well, now let's take it a step farther and say, well, let's break that up. And imagine you fund a Roth IRA for each of your kids those years. And now let's compound that by 25 years. Because that's found money. And as your advisor, I'm going to help you with this money we just found that you were about to give away. What could we actually do with it? And all of a sudden, it takes a really cool idea that was saving them some money, and all of a sudden compounds it. Like, wait, by working with you in this meeting for free, you gave me an idea that's going to end up at $500,000 for each of my kids in 20. Like, it all of a sudden becomes, again, not silly. I'm not saying you're going to be worth $20 million and the numbers are so big, but within reason, that experience, if they go meet with any other advisor, the advisor's probably not on a whiteboard, probably not getting into creative ideas. They are talking about AUM statements, insurance stuff, because that's the standard bar. And good news for advisors like me and you is the bar is so low that, like, the stuff we do, if anyone gets in front of me or you versus the average advisor, like, it's game over.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Sten. It's not that you need 1,000 of these strategies or even 100 of them. Like you said, you just need 1 or 2. And this example of putting the kids on the payroll for small business owners, right? And then another one could be the Augusta rule, right? There's just a couple of small ones. These are not crazy technical things. Like, we're not talking about, Sten, you didn't say, hey, let's create some intentionally defective grantor trust and let's change your residency to Puerto Rico. And maybe that would come up in a future meeting, but
Right.
these are like cut and dry 101, what you and I would consider 101, but they've never had an advisor tell them this. They've never had their CPA tell them this. Maybe they heard about it on a blog post, but never with enough confidence to actually implement. I mean, this is literal incredible value that you're bringing to the table.
Yeah, and the good news is, to the client, it's going to feel totally different too. You're going to build the rapport, and they will take way more action. I don't chase clients anymore. When I say, hey, we need to meet, they're like, oh, when I meet with Sten, it's good. So I'm going to meet with Sten. And you'll over time level up to where you're saying, hey, let's talk about cost segregation. I've gotten a lot of big AUM clients because I brought this to their attention. I don't file their tax return. I don't even do the study. But whenever you share an idea far enough for them to say, wow, I haven't heard of that, or I've never been showed it that way before, that idea is forever yours. Meaning, if that client eventually does a cost segregation or R&D study, and they're like, oh, that was Sten's idea. Even though all the CPA could do all the work, the attorney could do all the work, like, we have to be curators of great ideas. And what that means for your practice is you need to figure out a way to attract these ideas. And so we teach our advisors, you have idea partners, which used to be referral partners. I remember being taught to go and call attorneys and CPAs and try to tell them, like, hey, I'd love to tell you about my practice and have you send me people. And they never would. Like, it was just
never would, ever. Yeah.
Yep. And maybe randomly you get one and it kind of keeps you going. But now I teach our advisors, I'm like, you want to get with the biggest, baddest professionals and never expect a referral from them. Because the best ones are really busy. They don't really care about sending you business for a while probably. But what you need is what's in their head, their ideas. So when I sit down with the best tax attorney in Nashville, I'm not asking her or him for referrals because they're like, get out of my office. But if I say, tell me the top 3 things you're doing with clients right now, tomorrow I go and take those 3 ideas and I close business with it. So one idea from an idea partner as opposed to a referral partner, this could be a CPA, an attorney, a real estate agent, whoever is out there that is an expert in their craft, that one idea can get me 10 clients. And it would have taken me 5 years probably to get 10 referrals from them. And so we really want to say at the end of the day, and I love that you do this, what are average people doing? And let's not do that.
That's right.
And so
That's
I think
right.
a lot of advisors are having average meetings, they're coming with average ideas, and yet somehow they're frustrated that they're getting average results.
Yeah, and the above average seems so out of reach. And I remember those days, Sten. I know you remember those days too, where I think, great, how do I bring value to this meeting? But your idea of idea partners, and I love that, is, boy, who's already crushing? That's why I was excited to have you back on the podcast. I'm like, boy, if I need to if I want to learn something new, I don't need to find another textbook to read about the tax law. Like I need to find someone, whether it's, like you said, the top tax attorney in Tennessee, in Nashville, or another great financial advisor. What are those top couple of things? This, by the way, if you're ever at an industry conference, which most aren't worth going to, but if you're ever at a conference, there's other advisors, don't ask them about their weather or their kids or their hometown. Hey, what are the top 3 strategies you're using with clients right now? That's going to take you to the next level, like not just the next level, 10 levels.
Oh, yeah. And then we also teach on idea sources, meaning we subscribe to some CPA newsletters. Like Kitsis has great stuff. Like these are things you can just sign up for, and then all of a sudden information is being pushed at you. Horse's Mouth is a really cool resource. Like this doesn't mean you have to go get your PhD in this stuff. But if I hear about a new idea, I call one of my CPA partners. I'm like, hey, can I get 30 minutes to come meet with you? I just need you to teach me this, like cost segregation. Make me dangerous enough to be in a meeting on a whiteboard and explain the concept and the potential benefit. But then I'm going to tell them, hey, it's time to pass it off. But I've shown you what I can bring to the table. And so quantifying your value, one, communicates to the client, hey, I'm worth way more than my fee. But what I found is it actually helps the advisor understand their value.
Oh, totally.
Because we have a bunch of advisors that come to us, and this happened at our last event in January. We had a group come from Northwestern Mutual. There's 4 or 5 of them. The year before, they had done like 50 grand of financial planning fees between them, and one of them had done like 40 grand of it.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And their max financial planning fee was $4,000. And we asked them, like, where'd you come up with that? They're like, I don't know. It sounded like a good number. They left. Their baseline financial planning fee was $10K just after a day and a half with us. And they're on track to do like $250,000 of financial planning fees just because they believe now that they're actually worth it. And the clients are saying yes because they know how to communicate it. And so what I get fired up about is when I look back at young Sten in the business. You know, imagine, I know I've seen some pictures of you too, like we're in baggy suits and we're just wanting to do the best we can. And we're giving away all this value because we don't think we're worth it yet. But if I can get a hold of, a young advisor, somebody in the middle of their career, even an older advisor, it's like I have all these relationships and just get them to communicate their value and learn how to ask for a fee. What's amazing is most of the clients are going to say yes. It's really our lack of belief in ourselves that's stopping us.
Yeah, and our lack of belief, again, and I know you're a firm believer of this, right? It's 2 sides of the same coin. Our lack of a belief, yes, that results in lower planning fees. It also results in less action being taken, right? So when a client steps up to the table and they paid 10 grand to work with us, they're like, man, I got to take action on this thing. Like I'm pot committed. I'm in this thing deep. The other thing that came to mind, Sten, as you're walking through this, and I want to go back to this, the filters for making investment filters, that also creates the framework for everything else, right? So when a Fisher Investments calls them and they say, hey, show us the investment statements from Sten, and then they cherry pick some other portfolio that's done better. It's hard to do, but let's just say that we had found one, right? Yep. Then the clients already got this criteria, like, well, performance is one. What about the other 3? And what are you going to do about cost segregation? And what about my kids on the thing? And what about my taxes, right? So you've now, I know you know this is for our listeners, you've laid the foundation. You've changed the entire rules of the game forevermore. Yeah.
And you could document this in something you give them. I choose to kind of put it on the board at the beginning of each meeting with them because they realize like they get accustomed to seeing it, and then we can reference it back during the meeting. And that's why whiteboarding, while it seems simple, is kind of an art form to practice. You need to practice your whiteboard illustrations in an empty room. You should practice them in front of other advisors for them to say, hey, that didn't make sense, or hey, that's too sloppy. You shouldn't be trying to do the math as you go. You should have practiced it and had the numbers in your head. And so in our live events, we do whiteboarding live, and I critique it. I'm there doing it with you because these become superpowers in a meeting. And we've just had meeting after meeting, people are coming and saying, I was charging $1,500. I don't know why. Now my minimum fee is $4,000. We're on track to do this. And so the success stories are just getting us more and more fired up to say the future of our business is talented advisors that know how to charge for their advice. AUM's not going away. Insurance is always necessary. What's going to happen is advisors are going to realize, like, there's a good chance someday my client is going to interact with an advisor like that. And I've been at some meetings before and kind of shocked the crowd by saying, how confident are you if I met with every one of your clients? And sure, that comes across as cocky, but the point is like my experience is so different. Like, you might keep your grandma and your sister, but like, what about that business owner? When I come in and add this much value, even though you guys go to church together or play golf, there is enough of a value number that any client will leave.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Which is how they got to you in the first place, right? To any of us, right? There was something, whether they were doing it themselves or they had some advisor, there was some value number that they moved. And to your point, maybe you swayed that calculation because you knew them. But boy, when they come up to $120,000 of savings, they don't like you that much.
I think that's right.
They don't like you that much.
And also,
Back on
you
the
don't have to get the assets right away too. And I mean, what I did for years is I'd meet with somebody, I know they would have assets, and I'd invite them to lunch, and I'd spend all this time, and I'd give them all these ideas for free in the hope that someday they would do something. And, a lot of times they didn't. And I'm like, man, I've been calling this person for 3 years and they've never taken action. Now I respect myself enough to say, here's what it looks like to work together, pay me a fee, and then through the process, I'm going to see their statements. And if we can do better, I'm going to bring it up. And I tell them that's a separate engagement. And I say, we manage money really well. That's something we do. That's a superpower of ours, but we're going to start here. And so the good news is you'll get the AUM if you want it. And if they need help on insurance, you'll get to do that too. You just get to get paid for your time and ideas now. And as a business owner, if I added all of a sudden, $200K to your bottom line, you're hiring somebody that you've probably been waiting to hire for a while. Your rebrand, like these are things that are just going to make your business better. And it's a new vertical that almost every advisor is ignoring.
Well, I love that. I love that. So for advisors listening, right, and your mind is being blown and you're thinking, this is really awesome. I want to go back, Sten, to what you said about practicing the whiteboard, right? So you mentioned, and I know we're going quick because that's how you and I go. In a client meeting, it would be much more drawn out. It would be more articulate. But this, like these 4 pillars for filtering investments, this isn't something that you just off the top of your head thought of. This isn't like you're stepping up to the whiteboard and you're thinking, I wonder what I should draw. Like, every line you're going to draw, the little jokes you're going to make. Like you said, the math. You're not trying to like come up with the math on the spot. You're only putting words up there you know how to spell, right? Like all of these, right? I mean, like we laugh about this, but it's things that you and I are going through. Like I'm not going to spell whatever, because I don't know how to spell that. I'm not going to put that up on the board. So for advisors, listen, like this is like everything. It's very simple, but it's a lot of work. It's not easy, but it's very simple. There's
a quote by an author. I don't think we found who it was first yet, but it was, I would have written a shorter letter, but I didn't have enough time.
Yeah.
Meaning brevity is a gift. And it's actually hard to communicate a complicated idea in a short story form in less than a minute. When we do some of this practice, we've had advisors go up there and they're writing all these words and they're 5 minutes in and it's a room of advisors that you've lost us. And so I think to your point, like practice is important because to get it concise and direct, it doesn't come naturally.
So if you had to guess, and maybe this would be impossible to throw a number on, how many whiteboard illustrations do you think you've done? Like, do you think you can put a number to it? I mean, it's got to be in the thousands, right?
Yeah, because at this point, I've practiced enough that I can do it on the fly. Like, as I'm talking about a meeting, like somebody might own 3 businesses, I'm up on the whiteboard writing out the business names. I'm saying, hey, how much time are you spending at each one? But step one, if you're listening, you're like, that's intimidating. Or, hey, we don't have a whiteboard, or I didn't know we did until I opened the cabinet and there's a whiteboard.
What is that thing? Yeah.
Is go through your fact finder and just plant some ideas, like plant tax loss harvesting as a concept to teach when you get to assets. Do the 3 bucket approach, do the investment filter I talked about. Maybe if the person mentions real estate, you get up and do cost segregation. So like set yourself up to win just with some preparation.
I love that. Well, this podcast is all about taking action. First and foremost, Sten, how can advisors listening find out more about what you're up to? You've mentioned your training a couple of times, which I know you do, at least in the past. You've done it in your office building there in Tennessee, which is a beautiful place, and you've got a great setup there.
Yeah, on September 18th and 19th, we're having another live day-and-a-half event here. And this is, I mean, if you come to this, you'll never be the same. Like, this will change your practice, immediate revenue, because you're just in it with us. E-Advisor Network, we have our community. We have an online course some people can take if they don't want to travel yet. But check that out. We'll make sure to get those links to everybody. But my hope is that more advisors start realizing, I don't have to give this stuff away for free. Like, people are happily paying for this. And the good news is the other business, it's a both and. It's not an either or.
Yeah. 100%. Last thing that comes to mind, Sten, before we go, for all of our listeners, you and I kind of joked about this, like, hey, what's going to happen when you or I come up against another advisor's clients? For advisors listening, I would go in the assumption, like I would get off this podcast and I would say, what if every single prospect I had from here on out is also meeting with Sten? Sten, what kind of game would I have to bring to the table? Now, by the way, if you found out that was the case, I'd probably just throw in the towel now. Sten's got you beat. But since we're in a hypothetical world, that's a lens you need to go to. So when you're thinking like, hey, I think I'm going to sit down and watch Netflix tonight, Sten's not sitting down and watching Netflix. Like, he's thinking about, right? He's thinking about how am I going to whiteboard this thing? How am I going to up level this? How am I going to deliver even more value? Use that as your threshold, as your inspiration or threat, if you will, to take yourself to the next level. Sten, any parting thoughts before we go?
I hope everybody's investing in themselves. We challenge advisors in our communities. If you're funding your Roth IRA, your 401k, or your SEP, but you're not investing heavily in your business, whether it's community like the Perfect RIA or the Lead Advisor Network, like you'll get 100x rate of return on that. So if you're listening and you are not investing heavily into something for your business or yourself, that's step number one.
I love it. I love it. Well, Sten, thank you so much for the wisdom that you shared and all of the great stuff you do. And for all of our listeners, until next time, happy planning.